Staff, if we have a roll call, please.
All commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Lowry, who will attend later this evening.
Thank you. All right, next item. This is a time when we take public comments for items that are not on the agenda and are generally in the purview of the Planning Commission. And if you would like to come up and speak, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to the next item. Requests for continuances. Staff, are there any requests for continuances?
There are no requests for continuances.
All right. Moving on. The next item is the meeting minutes from October 3rd, 2024. Would anyone from the audience like to comment on the minutes from the October 3rd, 2024 meeting? Okay, no comments. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with Mr. Mosier's edits.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Call for a vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Our next item are public hearing items. Item number 2 is the Olea Restaurant Expansion. This is PA 2024-0064. The site location is 2001 West Cliff Drive, Suites 100 and 101. Staff, do you have a presentation for us this evening?
Good evening, Commissioners. Assistant Planner Daniel Kopschuber. This project's for a conditional use permit for an expansion of an existing restaurant, Olea, at 2001 West Cliff Drive. The project location is within the Walk Commercial Center. The Walk has 4 commercial buildings and a parking garage. The site was redeveloped in 2014 to add the parking garage to allow for medical uses and some restaurant uses at the site. The site's surrounded by the 880 apartments, and there's apartments also across West Cliff Drive with less density. There are restaurants in the vicinity serving beer and wine in addition to food. There is retail, a shopping center with Ralph's and CVS, medical offices adjacent, and to the north there's Chase Bank. Olea Restaurant is proposing to expand into the adjacent vacant suite shown on the left, partially out of frame. On the other side of that vacant suite is Salt and Straw ice cream, and then there's a medical user also on the ground floor next to that, and then at the end Earth Bar, which serves juice, and then in the floors above are medical users. The existing gross floor area of the restaurant is 3,205 square feet, and what they're proposing is 4,345 square feet. There will be no change to the existing permitted outdoor patio. The seating count will go from 114 seats allowable to 144 seats. There's no change to the hours of operation on the patio, no change in live entertainment or dancing, and the existing ABC license type will remain the same. And the on-site parking is sufficient to cover the proposed expansion. The project will need an updated operator's license due to the increase in floor area from the police department. So the existing patio is 498 square feet, no change there, and the existing layout of the restaurant, the interior public area used to serve customers is 1,409 square feet and will be expanded by 750 square feet to 2,159 square feet. And then the back of house will go from 1,796 square feet to 2,186 square feet. The parking on site, with the parking garage and surface parking, there are 404 spaces provided. And with all of the existing uses and the proposed expansion for Olea, there would be 369 parking spaces required, and that leaves a 35 space surplus. This is an appropriate use for the commercial general zoning district. There's no change to the existing operational characteristics, with the exception that the restaurant space will be expanding to an adjacent vacant suite, and the existing surplus parking is adequate for the proposed expansion. Police Department has reviewed and provided conditions of approval for the resolution. Some notable conditions: there is a proposed player piano in the expansion area. This is for accompanying dining, and it'll be unamplified. The music shall be played by no more than 2 performers, including patrons. Dancing is not permitted without an amendment to the use permit. Condition of approval number 28, the approval does not permit the premises to operate as a bar, tavern, cocktail lounge, or nightclub. There's not going to be no change to their ABC license. We recommend conducting a public hearing, finding the project exempt from CEQA, and adopting a resolution. Available for any questions and discussion, and we have a representative of the applicant, Sten Green, here as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? I have to be the guy, right? I did actually have a question for staff. There's condition 42, talks about a private dining room, and this is on handwritten page 29. Does it mean to say that there could be 49 people in that little space? And it was unclear to me where that space was, if it was 49 people. And that maybe the applicant could speak to that. Yeah, and then since we'll go ahead and come back to that with the applicant. So no questions then. Commissioners, do we have any ex parte communication? We'll start with Commissioner Patel.
None.
None for me?
None. None.
None.
All right, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation or comment?
Excuse me, Chair. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Lowry is present. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to come forward and make a... No other comments. Do you mind just responding to the question regarding condition 49? Or excuse me, condition 42. You could come forward, please, and state your name.
Evening, everyone. My name is Sten Green. I'm the operating partner there at Olia. So to your question, 49 total people on that whole side. There's a smaller area that can accommodate approximately 12 people in that back area. That's what they're referencing in the private dining room.
Okay, so maybe staff could look at that. I just didn't understand where the 49 was coming from. So, okay, thank you. Well, have you reviewed the conditions of approval and agree with them?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Then, commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
Chair Rosine?
Yes, sir.
Maybe for that condition, we'll just go ahead and amend it to, it'll be the occupant load based on the building code.
Something like, sure, thank you. Okay, then thank you, appreciate that. No further questions. Does anyone from the audience wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. I guess we've got our questions for there are no additional comments for the record, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion and action. Commissioners, would anyone like to comment or make a motion?
I don't see any issues. I think there's great time of use there. Whenever I've gone, there's never been issues parking. They have plenty of parking in the back. Obviously, most people don't use it, but there's plenty at night. So I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Call for a vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations to the applicant. Our next item. Item number 3 is the Zank residence.
Chair, real quick, I'm going to recuse myself from this item. I have a residence that's within 1,000 feet of the subject item, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Elmore. So this is the Zank
If we
residence.
could
This
just
is
hold until he's
Until
leaves the
he's-
room. Thank you.
okay. Sorry. All clear. This is PA 2024-0057. Site location is 2830 Bayview Drive. Staff, do we have a presentation this evening?
Yes, Chair. I just want to introduce you to Assistant Planner Jerry Arehi. This is his first Planning Commission presentation to you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chair Rosine, Planning Commissioners. Again, my name is Jerry Arregui, Assistant Planner at the Planning Division. Tonight's second public hearing item is a request for a coastal development permit and variance for the Zinc residence. The subject property is located on the northwest corner of Heliotrope Avenue and Bayview Drive in Colonel Del Mar, and its surrounding properties include other predominantly single-family dwellings between 1 and 3 stories. The existing neighborhood was subdivided in 1906 with 10 lots to face Heliotrope Avenue. The subject property and the neighboring property has 2 single-family dwellings which were constructed over a portion of 4 lots, and these now face Bayview Drive, and they have a reoriented location and are perpendicular to the rest of the lots on Heliotrope Avenue. Typically for corner lots, the front setback is along the shortest property line that faces the street. On the right image, circled in red, is the front setback of the neighboring property from the subject property that has the same orientation. And this has a front setback along Bayview and a 10-foot rear and 4-foot side setbacks. But there's an exception when the setback map derives a front setback. That does not apply. So in this case, on the left-hand side, Heliotrope Avenue does have a 20-foot setback on the setback map. However, I will say that the setback map is intended to apply to standard lots, where the 20-foot setback is intended to be across typical lots that are between 30 and 40 feet wide. Because of the subject property's reorientation, that 20-foot setback is along the 110-foot width of the property, which fronts Heliotrope Avenue. And the rear setback is 10 feet. Typical lot in CDM butts an alley and has a 10-foot rear, a 5-foot rear setback. The subject property has a 10-foot rear setback because it butts another residence, and that's a standard rear setback. And again, that is the entire length of the property. And so this really creates a property that has a smaller buildable area and proportional to the property. So the proposed project tonight is to demolish the existing single-unit dwelling and construct a new single-unit dwelling with 3 requests. The requests are for setback encroachments, additional floor area, and third-floor step-back encroachments. And this requires approval of a variance and a coastal development permit. So there are a set of findings that are required to approve a variance, and those include that the property is special and has unique circumstances, that the granting of the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights, and that granting the variance will not constitute a special privilege nor be detrimental to the surrounding area. And there's similar findings that are required in the local coastal program implementation plan that really just overlap with those in Title 20, but there's additional findings regarding coastal resources. And for the coastal development permit, there are findings regarding public access to the coast and public views. So the variance request, again, is for floor area, setbacks, and the third floor step backs as measured from the property line. So based on the existing setback configuration, the property is only allowed a 4,445 square foot amount of constructible floor area. And the applicant is providing or requesting a 5,958 square feet of floor area. That front setback, again, based on the setback map, is required to be 20 feet, and the applicant is proposing 10. The rear setback is required to be 10 feet because it abuts another residence, and the applicant is requesting 4 feet. For the third floor setbacks, 35 feet required for the front, 25 required for the back. The applicant is requesting 11 feet 3 inches in the front, 9 feet 10 inches in the rear. So I did want to highlight that all other development standards are met. So I did want to highlight the setbacks from the side, which are on Bayview and the property adjacent. So the side setbacks are 4 feet based on the existing setback configuration, but the applicant is providing a larger setback on Bayview of 20 feet and a larger setback on the other side, which is 5 feet. Similarly, for the third floor setbacks, 6 feet are required, and the applicant is providing much more than that. So looking back at the subject property, again, that 20-foot setback along Heliotrope Avenue, which is along the 110-foot length of the property and 10-foot rear, it creates a property that has 54% of it is setback. And when you compare it to the neighboring property, it has the same orientation. However, because it does have the setbacks off of Bayview, it has a buildable area that's much larger than the subject property, about 900 square feet, even though the property is smaller. And it has a setback area of 38%, whereas the subject property with the current setback configuration is 54%. Now, in order to determine how much setback encroachment is appropriate, staff analyzed the amount of setback in other properties in the vicinity, and staff found that other properties have between 24 to 37% of its area dedicated to setbacks, and again, the subject property is over half at 54%. So this is the existing setback configuration, and if the setback map had not otherwise delegated a 20-foot setback along Heliotrope Avenue, the front setback, by definition, would be along Bayview Drive because it is the shortest property line that abuts the street. And the setback along Heliotrope Avenue would be 4 feet and 10 feet on the rear and 4 on the other side. However, the applicant is requesting a larger setback on the Heliotrope side, increasing it from 4 feet to 10 feet, being cognizant of other properties that have 20-foot setbacks along Heliotrope as required by the map. I do want to note that not all sections of this area encroaches the 10 feet. There are some areas that are being set back 13 feet, 6 inches. So in its worst condition, these areas are the areas that are at a 10-foot setback. And the actual livable area, the living room, there's a balcony above, those are set back between 2 to 3 feet and are set back at most 13 feet, 6 inches to that interior floor area. Regarding the floor area limit variance, the applicant is requesting a 1,513 square foot deviation. So based on the existing setback configuration, the maximum floor area again is 4,454. And in order to determine how much floor area limit exceedance is appropriate, staff needs to analyze the existing FAR and the proposed. So the existing FAR is 0.68. And staff analyzed that of other residences in the area, the same ones done for the setback, and staff found that the FAR ranges between 0.92 up to 1.13, and the requested exceedance of the floor area limit brings the FAR, the property, of 0.91, which is still below the range of other properties in the area. Did want to note that there was comments regarding the size of the property, and there highlighted below are 3 properties which are larger than typical properties in Corona del Mar, and they do have maximum floor area limits that range between 5 and 10,000, and floor area ratios between 1.06 and up to 1.13. And so the requested floor area limit of 5,958 and the FAR is still on the lower end of that. The final request is for a step back variance. So the first image above is a typical CDM lot. In red are the required third floor step backs, 35 feet for the front, 20 for the rear, and 6 for the sides. The image below shows the existing configuration, it shows the proposed configuration. Because the project has been developed with the front setback along Bayview, it's clear that the 40-foot front third floor setback, and 44-foot rear third floor setback more than comply with the required third floor setbacks shown above. Staff also analyzed coastal views from this property. There are a few coastal viewpoints, Ocean and Carnation, Lookout Point, and West Jetty View Park. However, these are not visible from the subject property due to intervening structures. And I will note that the project does comply with the height limit set forth in the R1 zoning district. Staff also analyzed coastal access. So there's a variety of several coastal access points at the street ends of many of the streets on Colonel Del Mar. And the proposed project is majority of private improvement with the exception of some parkway improvements. And so therefore, there isn't going to be any impedance to coastal access by the proposed project. Staff did receive several comment letters in opposition to the project. Some of the main issues raised was that the variance was going to change the charm of CDM and along Heliotrope Avenue, that the floor area deviation is excessive, and that the variance would set precedent for other variances along Heliotrope. And staff's response to the first comment about the charm is that setbacks vary in Corona Del Mar, even on Heliotrope. So setbacks can vary from 20 feet from setback down to 10 feet. And on the next block over from Heliotrope, there's a 15-foot front setback, as shown on the setback map in the previous slide. Regarding the floor area deviation being excessive, just to reiterate, the floor area ratio of the property is 0.91, which, based on the size of the lot, is appropriate because it's lower than other properties, which go up to 1.13. And based on the comment of the variance precedent, so the variance is only intended to apply to unique properties and not for standard lots. The zoning code is intended to apply to standard lots, and the whole purpose of the variance is to provide flexibility for lots that don't have reasonable setbacks. And so in this case, the unique condition is that the setback is along the length of the property, 110, whereas typical lots, it's on the 30-foot width, up to 40 feet width. And so with that, staff does recommend the Planning Commission to conduct a public hearing, find that this project is exempt from CEQA, and adopt the resolution approving the coastal development permit and variance. That concludes my presentation. Available for any questions. The applicant and owner are in attendance and are available for questions as well.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions of staff? Commissioner Salim?
Jerry, thank you for the presentation. When were the lots first reoriented?
The neighboring lot at 2820 was constructed in 1937 based on county records, and the subject property in 1947 based on county records.
Thank you. And the current setbacks on the current building on the subject property, what are they?
So the current setbacks, so the property does encroach already. So there's a history of different modification permits and variances that were reviewed by the Planning Commission and Modifications Committee in the 90s. And those allowed several encroachments into the rear setback up to 6 feet. So the existing condition provides less than a 4-foot rear setback, and the front setback is 19 feet in its current condition. But there is a raised deck that encroaches an additional 4 feet because it is larger than 42 inches as allowed in the front setback.
So off of Heliotrope,
Correct.
It's 15?
It is
19 minus the 4?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Harris?
Jerry, thank you very much and welcome. Can you walk us through, well, first, the house was built in 48, the other one 37. Up until 2008, were they just legal non-conforming, or what was their status?
So the existing condition was approved because there's existing modification permits that allowed the existing residence and the garage to be constructed. And those are based on the rear setback encroachments, since that rear setback is 10, and the existing condition is about 4, and in some locations less than 4.
But they just had, they didn't have these parcels at that time, for that whole time. They kind of crossed over those perpendicular to the existing ones, it sounds like.
Right, so because they were built before the Subdivision Map Act, properties were able to cross property lines, and they wouldn't be able to do that now, but because that was done prior to that, they are now recognized as legal lots.
And this 2008 certificate of compliance, is that a parcel map? Is that what we're saying? And it was just finally accepted and recorded?
So To recognize some of these parcels that were reconfigured prior to the subdivision map act, there's structures on them. We record a certificate of compliance, which essentially allows us to recognize these parcels as legal lots.
And then I thought I read, just to correct from this Commissioner Celine's last question, I thought I read it encroaches 6.5 feet off of heliotrope as existing. Is that what you have too? Okay. So I just want to confirm that. So we're, essentially a 4-foot difference from what they're asking for on this one, but it would still be 14 from, okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bartow?
Yeah, thanks for addressing this. I had a question on the history of the setback map S10B. I see it referenced, but not any of the history behind it. I guess specifically, what's the timeline on that? And what's the timeline on the underlying setback from heliotrope? Because I'm trying to make sense of how that relates to all these different timelines.
Yes, it's a good question, Commissioner Bardo. The setback maps were originally called districting maps. They were first introduced in the zoning code, I believe, in the early 1940s. The early districting maps didn't have individual lots shown. It just provided what the front setback should be for entire blocks. And then in 2010, when we updated our zoning code, we converted those old districting maps to setback maps. And that's when you started seeing the actual individual lots shown. But we didn't change many of the setbacks. We essentially just carried over those same setbacks from the old maps.
Because I'm trying to make sense of it. When I look at the excerpt that was up showing the setbacks, the two lots there are just really weirdly configured as far as setbacks. And I'm trying to make sense of how that ended up that way, especially since if the district maps were done in the 40s, the house was built in 48, so presumably even in 1948 when it was built, it was non-compliant with the setbacks, or is that how we should understand that?
Yeah, if we can clarify, do you mind pulling up the presentation? Right, so the image on the left-hand side, that's our current setback map. But I think at the time, in the old zoning code, the wording was a little different. And so, as Jerry mentioned, the narrowest frontage of a corner lot was determined to be the front for the purposes of setbacks. We think that at some point in time, they treated just Bayview as the front and then possibly didn't apply heliotrope as a side, or they applied it, I'm not sure. But in the prior modification permits that were issued to allow for some additions, they did recognize the existing house as legal non-conforming.
That was actually my next question, which is, they discuss a number of modifications, including the garage and the boundary to the northwest, but they didn't address the front setback at any of the modifications. At least not referenced in the report. Did they?
No, in the modification number 3971 that was approved in 1992, it allowed a 1-foot encroachment into the 20-foot setback along heliotrope.
Yeah, that's what I was, versus the 6'3".
Correct. I think the 6'3", that it represents the deck, the overheight deck that's in that front setback.
Gotcha. And I guess, again, going back to this snaking rear setback, which is, it's curious. I mean, the whole configuration is obviously not something anybody would have envisioned, I think, when they were starting it. But okay, thanks.
Commissioners, any further questions of staff? No? Okay. Then let's move on to commissioners. Do we have any ex parte communication, starting with Commissioner Bartow?
None.
None for myself?
None.
None.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation? think it'd be appropriate for the applicant to come forward at this time, please.
Commissioners, my name is Brandon Linsday from Brandon Architects, representing the client as the applicant. A lot I'm going to repeat some of the stuff that was previously said, but if you guys need to ask a question for me as well, I'm happy to answer. In regards to the property itself, it's not a standard lot. I think that looks obvious that it isn't. There's unique conditions in the village all over. There's even two located just a block away at 2800 Goldenrod and also at 211 Heliotrope. 211 Heliotrope chose to keep a, I believe, 4-foot setback off Heliotrope. And on 2800 Goldenrod, they actually went with a 10-foot setback, which was much more sensitive, I think, to the nearby structures. In my second point is towards the FAR study. A lot of these standard lots and lots in the village, they all seem pretty fair. They all seem to end up at a close to similar FAR. And in this particular case, due to the amount of setbacks that was on it, there was a substantially less buildable area. In fact, if you look at the configuration of a 20-foot front yard and you look at the 10-foot rear yard, when you're supposed to take your 15-foot setback for your third floor in the front and the back, you don't get a third floor. Third, if we were to fully keep Bayview as our front yard and accept that as our front yard orientation, then the intent of the code was that our side yard could be 4 feet. I think we'd all agree that 4 feet on heliotrope wouldn't be sensitive to the community. Our home maintains the 20-foot off Bayview, which so does the similar home that's taking its frontage off Bayview right next door. And it takes a 10-foot setback to structure, but there's a lot of articulation and setback in the architecture itself to pull the massing off the street. It's not our intent to make a negative design for the neighborhood. Our intent, as always, we've done a lot of homes in the community, is to always enrich the neighborhood with beautiful architecture and design. Available for any questions if you have any further questions for me.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Okay. And I guess if this item was approved, have you reviewed the conditions of approval? And do you agree with them?
We would accept them.
Okay, thank you. So now's the time for the public to speak on this item. It looks like we do have several folks that would like to come up and speak. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Good evening, I'm Cheryl Fisher. 16 years ago, my husband and I purchased a home in the 200 block of Heliotrope Avenue, where there are 20-foot setbacks in front of all 15 homes that are currently on our block, creating an open feeling and a better view of the ocean and the skyline than on other flower streets with different code requirements. During the 16 years that we've lived, nearly half of the homes there have been rebuilt. One's been remodeled and 5 are brand new constructions. And the existing homes range from 2,000 square feet to 4,500 square feet. All of us who bought or built homes here were aware that the building code, of what the building codes were when we purchased our lots. And we respected the codes when we drew up our plans. The plans for at least 2 of these homes were also prepared by Brandon architectural firms. And the owners of these homes tell us they were repeatedly reminded of the codes and restrictions as the plans were being prepared. So the need for variances or to exceed the gross floor plan area or encroach upon the front or rear setbacks wasn't necessary. Unlike the applicant, they didn't feel it was necessary to exceed the codes or that they were deprived if they couldn't exceed them, as was suggested on page 10 of the report. I strongly recommend that the Commission uphold the existing building codes and deny this request to exceed the gross floor area limits by 1,513 square feet to create a 5,275 square foot home. I noticed it even got larger up on the screen, with a 682-foot attached three-car garage and a 2,340 square foot subterranean basement totaling 8,297 square feet. The report states on page 16 that this home is compatible in design, bulk, and scale to the surrounding residents on Heliotrope. Compatible? This home is 4 times larger than the 2,000-foot home. It is nearly 2.5 times larger than the 3,000 square foot homes on our block and 3,797 square feet larger than the largest home. This report states the building pad on the lot in question is not consistent with the existing neighborhood. The report is correct. It's not consistent as a buildable area on this block, as shown at the top of page 13, is the same size as my entire 30-foot lot. And we managed to build a home within those lines and have the appropriate setbacks with no special privileges, as was suggested on page 9. As I see it, with this much larger buildable area to work with, the need for this number of exceptions to the building code is not because it's a non-standard lot as suggested on page 1 of the report, or because it involves special circumstances as suggested on page 9, but because it is a proposed home that's too large for the lot. And I will say that I believe there's an error in your packet. The home on 2820 Bayview that's currently there now is not facing Bayview. It is facing Heliotrope, and it does observe the setback. So this is a game saying that this one is facing Bayview. It's not. It's facing Heliotrope. If you drive down the street, you can see that. So I think by saying that the front is the side and the side is the front of this house, as shown on page 7, is clearly the front of this
Thank you.
house, not the back.
There are quite a few people that would like to speak
Realize
this
that.
evening.
I just thought you'd want to know there was an error in your report.
Thank you very much. For the record, all of the letters that have been sent in have been sent to the commission, so we are aware of them and read them. But if you would like to come up and make any additional comments, feel free to do so at this time.
My name is Pam Smith. I live at 245 Heliotrope, and we are friends of Jason and Michelle, and we also use Brandon Architects when we built our home that we still love. We totally disagree with the variances being asked for, and especially the 10-foot setback on Heliotrope and the expanded third floor. In 1948, 3.5 lots were on Heliotrope were rezoned to make 2 lots. When the current house was built at this location, it had a 20-foot setback to conform with the rest of the houses on the street and to follow the city codes. In the staff report, it states a variance should be granted to maintain parity between the variance site and nearby properties in the same zoning district to avoid granting of special privileges to one property. This is exactly what is being proposed. Every other house with a Bayview address that has the front of the house on either Goldenrod, Heliotrope, and Iris all have 20-foot setbacks to the front of their houses facing those streets. We feel the charm of the flower streets in Corona Del Mar is driving up and down the streets and seeing the same setbacks. These lots were laid out in 1906, and that desire and hope that they would always remain the same. Another variance is asking for 1,500 square feet. I have to laugh at this. That's half the size of our house. This would be needed to also enclose a rooftop office. Many of us would have liked to have enclosed our rooftops, but we were told the maximum livable square footage, again, and I quote from the staff, granting of, the variance will not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with the limitations on other properties in vicinity and the same zoning district. If these plans are approved as requested by the applicant, this would completely contradict the Planning Commission's own statement once again. When we purchased our property, we felt comfortable that we would always maintain a view out of the front of our home to the ocean, thanks to the 20-foot setbacks on Heliotrope. With this proposed variance, we and anyone walking down Heliotrope will have a view of a 10-foot wide, 24-foot tall wall as an obstruction. We do have a proposal for a compromise that we would like to recommend. This would use a combination of the setbacks the city requires and some being asked by the applicant. This proposal would have a 20-foot setback on heliotrope. I think in the letter we sent, most of you received this, that we're asking for, that would have a 4-foot setback on Bayview, 20-foot setback on heliotrope, and 4-foot setbacks on the sides and the back. We appreciate your consideration in this matter. We're all hoping to preserve the charm and integrity of the village of Corona Del Mar. We do feel if Jason and Michelle were on our side of the project, they would be opposed to this also. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Becky Bethel, and my parents are actually David and Pam. I was working with Brandon Architects, and I went to every single one of their architectural meetings that they did with Brandon Architects. Everybody gave you a lot of dates and when things switched and percentages and things like that. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of what my parents are feeling, and so that you can understand the personal side of what's going on these streets. My parents are from the Midwest. They raised us in Arizona. My dad worked super hard. He was in putting air conditioning units in Arizona on roofs on weekends, missing our softball games, basketball games, things like that. His dream for his entire life was to live in the flower streets. When we would come vacation, he would bore us every single time driving up and down the flower street saying, "Can you imagine ever living here?" We would have to do it every single time, multiple times throughout the week. It was their dream as a family and as a couple to be able to do this. They finally get that, and they build the dream house of their life with Brandon Architects. They love their house. Another aspect that they probably would never talk about and don't know I'm going to say, my mom has MS, and this house was built with those thoughts in mind. In case there's ever an issue for mobility, Chris Brandon himself sat there and designed the best view of the entire house to be outside of my parents' window. So if my mom looks from her bed, it is the best view of the entire property. We saved it not for the 3rd-story patio, we saved it for my mom. So she would always have the best view out of our property. And Chris was a big part of that. And he said, you never have to worry about it because there's setbacks all the way down this street. So we designed the house for my mom in that way. Those are the things that didn't just frustrate my parents, but really hurt them to know that this is a friend, this is an architect that I've worked with, and they felt taken advantage of. This is wrong. At this point, it just feels wrong. So one of the points that you made was that it wouldn't be detrimental to the neighborhood. This is extremely detrimental. If you look up and down that street and the effects that it'll have on multiple people and many people's dream homes, things that they've worked their entire life for, and that would be changed on something like this. One more thing that I noticed when I was driving around the town, over the last couple of months, all the signs around has been, keep Newport great, right? Keep Newport great. We live here now. My kids are growing up here. Newport is this great community. And this type of change to expand and take away views from multiple people just for one variance of one house. And I want to also remind everyone that the owner also owns the house next door. So they want to build, upwards of 8,000 square feet so that they could look into their pool next door with the guest house. Seems excessive. And so you're going to take away views from people and opportunities to expand what's turned into some kind of an estate on the flower streets. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
I live on, my name's Shala Naruzi, and my husband and I live on 2828 Ocean Boulevard, which is on the corner of Heliothorpe and Ocean. And we have lived in Newport Beach since 1978, and we love Newport, and especially Corona Del Mar is the crown, is the jewel of Newport. And we always wanted to move down here, and we did. But all these gigantic houses on small streets and small lots, it just takes away the character of Corona del Mar. I'm not against anyone to build a nice home, but it has to be in a way that's proportionate to the way the lots, you know? I mean, I request that you honor the request of people and, you know, what they wish and they want. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Chair Rosine, members of the commission, my name is Jim Mosier. I do not live anywhere near this property, but I do have two comments. One is we heard tonight that a property owner is deprived of some essential right if they don't have the ability to construct the same floor area ratio as other properties in the area. I cannot recall how many times I've heard that same argument made here, but it's never made any sense to me, because if our standard is that everybody should have the same floor area ratio, then why in the world does our zoning code limit residential properties by floor area limit that takes into account the setbacks? And then the second comment is, if you and the staff sincerely believe that the setbacks for this property are incorrect and not what they should be, and they should be something different, why are we pursuing a variance and continuing that mistaken, in somebody's opinion, setback map? Why do we not ask the city council to change the setback map to reflect what you convince them are the correct setbacks for this property? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Scott Christie, and I don't live near this property, but I'm in Corona del Mar on another flower street, and I'm friends of Pam and Dave Smith. Regarding 2830 Bayview Drive, we'd like to provide a response because this directly affects any resident in Corona del Mar, which we're a part of. We disagree with the Zink's decision to ask for a 10-foot setback variance on heliotrope for a very obvious reason. Granting this variance for one household will set a precedence for future developments, negatively impacting the neighborhood's aesthetics. If it is granted for one household, how will it not be granted for others? If this happens, it will impact the charm and conformity of the neighborhood. Many of the neighbors will now have a view of the side of a house when they look down the street instead of the beautiful aesthetics of the city has worked to maintain. Also, there are rules and regulations in place for a reason. No one person should be allowed to override these rules and regulations for something that only benefits them. The Zinks have created a monopoly on the corner of heliotrope by owning 3 properties right next to each other. It seems that because of this, they believe their request is reasonable and doesn't impact other properties. However, the residents on heliotrope and in the surrounding village of Corona del Mar know this will create a domino effect for other builds. It is unfair to impact residents that don't have the monetary means to do the same, or current builds that are respecting and conforming to the city standards. We appreciate your consideration on this matter. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Robert Stainer. I'm here representing my mother. I did grow up in this town. My mom couldn't be here today because she's an invalid. She lives on the 200 block of heliotrope as well. We can see the Zank residence directly from our balcony, diagonally. I gotta tell you, all these exceptions that this council is proposing to make is becoming ridiculous. I mean, are we gonna turn into Florida? We're just gonna have houses that are stair-stepping all the way up and down the street, and then it can just be a big commercial area and completely lose all its charm. Everything that it originally was. You know, this was never the village. It was Old Corona del Mar. You know, I grew up in Spyglass Ridge. When I was 9 years old, we moved to Old Corona del Mar. I worked for Gordon Kilmer at Big Corona Beach at the snack bar. I grew up in this town. I love this town. And to watch what's happening to Old Corona del Mar just makes me so sad, because it's just a complete disrespect to everyone who's been here the whole time, or most of the time. Obviously, none of us have been here since 1906, I don't think. But, you know, it used to be a real community. It used to have a lot of families. We haven't had trick-or-treaters in 20 years. When I was growing up here, streets were full of kids. It's not anymore. It's turning into something that it shouldn't. And I really believe that if we continue to make these exceptions, other people coming here will expect the same treatment. And then where will we be? We'll be in a place that is no longer the place we love, but has turned into something else. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers this evening?
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frank Turney. I live at 302 Heliotrope. Moved there in '97 with my family. And we had a fairly contemporary house when we moved into it. 6 years ago, we decided to rebuild, remodel, rebuild. We tore down the front half of our house based on a decision that we can have a nice view in front of our house if we put a deck on top, which we did. It's an open deck on the front of our house, and we can have a pretty good ocean view and Catalina view. The house that's being built now has already taken away part of that view. And I understand, I mean, that's just the way things work, so there's no problem with that. But when we built our house, we went right by the law down the road, and we complied with all of the ordinances. And I appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you continue to uphold those ordinances for us. I would love to have an extra 25% square footage on my house. It was not part of the code then, so I'm not sure it should be now. That house on the corner that we're talking about is already built up on the ground there. I assume a lot of you have probably driven by and seen it, but the street kind of goes down like this, across the intersection here. The garages that are now going to be on the side of the house are pretty much at street level, it looks like to me. Then when you curl around to the front of the house on Heliotrope, it seems like it's on this higher level of land that looks like it's built up over the natural land that's there. So I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like the overall height's going to be even higher because it's built up from that. So when you take that, you move another 10 foot over here, and you go up all the way, and he's coming up all the way over to the top, to the height that he's allowed, I assume. Anyway, if I just measure on what they've done on the other house to this one, I'm going to lose a tremendous amount of visibility. I'm just one person. I know that doesn't matter so much. I do think that the codes matter, the ordinances matter. I know progress is progress and time moves on, but I think everybody should be playing somewhat with the same deck of cards. And I really look for you to help us uphold those ordinances and codes. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional speakers? Hold on.
My name's Charlie Bogner. I'm going to give you a little different scenario. I think this thing was figured out, and it was figured out about 80 years ago because an engineer sat in a meeting like this and said, guys, we got a problem because all the lots on Heliotrope face Heliotrope except at the end at Bayview and Heliotrope, it runs parallel. So to observe the 20-foot setbacks, which I know you guys, meeting 80 years ago, is sacrosanct and just the most important thing. We got to figure out a way to do this. And you know what? The guys back then were really smart. Newport Beach hires smart engineers. And he goes, I got it figured out. We're going to supersize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take surrounding property and I'm going to make that lot twice as big. So that person can't later say, oh, well, you know what? You're taking 20 foot. I don't have a buildable area because that lot now is 59 feet by 110. A lot of the other ones are 30 feet. So you're dealing with a lot that's double the size. Without going to any variance, he can build over 6,000 foot with the subterranean. So he doesn't need any variances to get 6,000. To get 8,000, he needs help from you guys. So for the last, that house was built in 48. So for the last 76 years, everybody that's touched that house, owned it, remodeled, built, whatever they've done, they've all had the same constraint, and that was the 20-foot setback on Heliotrope has to be observed, because otherwise you're screwing everybody behind you. You're taking away the view if you go with that 10-foot setback. So essentially, you guys are being asked to help one person basically steal the view and the intrinsic value on the houses behind them. I don't know. I just think it seems kind of crazy. But my last comment is, if you look at, this is off page C1 of Brandon Architects' submission to you guys. Do you guys have a copy of this? Okay. So if you look to the right, this is not a unicorn. So if you look to the right at the corner of Iris and Bayview, that guy's got more of a, he's got more of a claim that he shouldn't have a 20-foot setback on Iris because he's got a Bayview address, he's got a front door, and yet he's been required to be 20 foot in. So you guys are starting a thing here, you know, better hire some attorneys because the next guy's going to say, and there's another one on Marigold, there's these lots that have that configuration where along the main corridor, they're at least twice as long as the adjoining ones, but it's a side lot. So, you know, for the last 70, 80 years, all these guys have been required to leave the corridor open. And I just think this sets a crazy precedence where you go, if you deny the next guy, okay, well, why'd you give it to him? And if you give it to the next guy, everyone behind is, well, get ready. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers this evening? Okay. Seeing none, would the applicant like to care to respond to any of these comments? Please.
Brandon Linsday from Brandon Architects. Just two more points to make, I guess, is we did study views at angles. We provided renderings from up the street at different angles to see what the extra 10 foot of structure sticking out, where it's really only on the first level, the second story, and even the third step back additionally. We did studies on that to make sure that we weren't impacting views from neighboring properties. It's been submitted to the city, it's record. Happy to share it with any other neighbor too, but it was studied. Also, I mean, again, this isn't a standard lot, and to some of the points about it should have been maybe cleaned up a long time ago, sure, but it isn't, and that's why there's variances, and that's why there's these discussions to figure out the best way to configure it. And in the end, you know, we do also serve our client who is a homeowner who lives on the street as well. We do want harmony. We do want a beautiful home there. We're not here to offend anyone, and just want what's, you know, can be deemed as fair. Thank you, and I'm available for question too if anyone else has any remaining.
Thank you. Staff, is there any comments that you would like to make for the record?
Yes, Yes, thank you, Chair. Quite a few comments, so I just wanted to go through a few. So regarding the staff report stating that the property faces Bayview, that was really meant to refer to the orientation of the lot and not necessarily the home. So per the definition of a front lot line, regardless of where the home is accessed, the front of the lot is the shortest side, which faces the street, which is the narrow side, which faces Bayview. There was another comment regarding the basement. So as indicated in the staff report, the basement is exempt from floor area so long as it's a fully subterranean basement. So any property can develop a basement and it wouldn't count against their floor area. Finally, I wanted to the comment regarding the adjacent property at 2900 Bayview, which is a double lot. This is a traditional double lot that I highlighted on the floor area table. And by what I mean by traditional is it faces the street that it is on Iris. And so that actually has a maximum floor area limit of over 10,000 and a floor area ratio of 1.13. And that's because it gets a more typical setback along the narrow side, whereas for the subject property, it's on the long side. So it would actually be a larger home in that normal scenario.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back. Commissioners, anyone like to make any comments? Commissioner Langford.
Chair Rosine, thank you. Beautiful project. I don't think there is a systemic risk of approving variances because I think this is a unique situation. I appreciate staff always looking for ways to make developments work. I think that's the right posture for the city to have. So I appreciate that on behalf of homeowners. And I think it's okay to ask for variances. So I think that's fine of the applicants. So those are kind of one side of the coin. The other side is so it appears that there was, 3 or 4 lots that were owned in common back in 1948. And if that person was here today, I'd say, oh, great, like you're doing something unique with the orientation and there might be benefits from it, from a developer's standpoint. You're like, oh, I can do something unique and now it's facing the ocean, something like might be more valuable, but it's a calculated risk. There's setbacks from heliotrope, so I just kind of work within those parameters. There's upside, there's downside, I'm going to make it happen. Mr. Zenk is likely not the one that's owned it since 1948, but he's kind of the successor in interest to the decisions the previous property owner made. So the way I think of it is, we're not correcting something that wasn't thought out well. Like the city was thought out well when it was designed, and it was a property owner that took this calculated risk a long time ago. And I don't really feel like I need to be in the position where I need to fix that. This isn't, something that kind of backs up to a canyon, and it's not one of those kinds of fixes, in my opinion. So that's the way I'm looking at it, and I'm open to be persuaded about it, but that was kind of the way I see the setback. Like I want to protect setbacks in Corona Mar, and so those are my thoughts. If anyone has anything they want to add.
Commissioners? Commissioner Bartow?
I think I echo at least what I think you're saying. I guess, and again, I'd say that I think the architecture is very nice, and I think it's a pretty project. I guess what I'm not understanding is, assuming there's not a pre-existing interest here that was prior to, the 40s. It's hard to understand how this is a setback that is a surprise to whoever got it. I guess I don't see, if I bought a property with a setback, I'm not sure if I would look at it as if I can just get rid of that setback, unless I had a compelling understanding of why. So I guess I'm kind of looking at the same way that decisions were made. And, if I owned both lots, I probably would have subdivided them differently. considering the setback. It doesn't feel like an unbuildable lot. It feels like a reasonably sized lot with a setback that fits the neighborhood. It's kind of where I'm sitting right now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a couple comments here. So I appreciate staff putting together that FAR information for us to digest, and it does make sense, but I'm having difficulty making the necessary findings for a variance here, and I'm going to tell you my reasoning. I think that this home, while beautiful, will absolutely dominate the street scene on Heliotrope. And I don't know where the 10-foot setback idea came from. And I don't know if there is room for special consideration on what that setback could be, but I don't think that 10 feet is the answer. And, and then when you take a look at it from the buildable square footage that this lot could have, even with the variance, so let's just assume that the variance setbacks were in place, this home still exceeds the buildable square footage by over 200 square feet. Not a lot, but it's highly unusual that that would happen. And I just struggle with that because it feels like there's an overbuilding taking place here. So I feel like it's overbuilt. I feel like that in order to make the findings, we need to say that it's harmonious with the neighborhood. I don't see that. And I do sort of feel like there is some sort of implied special privilege by moving forward with the buildable square footage as it's being proposed this evening. So that's my take on it. And I don't know if there's anyone else who would like to speak.
I'll just say I'm incredibly conflicted. I mean, from one perspective, I think the situation was created in 1948 or whatever, and it would seem to me to make some sense to go ahead and adjust the setbacks to reflect where the short side of the lot is and what have you. On the other hand, it is inconsistent with the area. And then I also go back to the fact that, as Commissioner Bardo pointed out, this person bought this property a year ago knowing what the setbacks were. And, if that wasn't okay, then I certainly understand the request to try something different, but I think it does affect the character of the community, and I think this would overtake the street scene. I think it would be a lot. On the other hand, I think what they're left with is less than wonderful, but it is still certainly buildable, and they can still get a nice house. So kind of going back and forth on it, but a lot of conflict there.
Vice Chair Harris.
Thanks everyone for coming out. Appreciate everyone getting up to speak and telling us where they're at. I share a lot of the sentiments with what people are saying, and just the change of character, and it's a lot different town than it was when I was a kid. But for me, the city more or less decided this in 2008, and when they accepted the parcel lines as they are, or the lines as they are. And so as much as I, agree in some ways and don't like it, I think down to what Mr. Mosier, the way he described it, and why wouldn't they adjust, the underline, or make an overlay or change the zoning or something there. But I drove up down the streets again. I've been searching the maps for days. I honestly can't find anything similar to this except for on Ocean. And I know that's not the same. So that's even hard for me to totally get there. But, it's almost reluctantly, I would probably support it based on the 2008, the city approving it and accepting it. And I don't, I think the accommodations are reasonable if you accept that from the short side. So I think that's where I'm at. I probably disagree with my compatriots here.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion? Commissioner Lowry, would you like to speak?
Yeah, if we have another few minutes for discussion. I did I was, as I was kind of just putting pen to pencil, or, pen to paper, it did occur to me that the 10-foot rear setback didn't necessarily need to be that deep. So I feel like that would be somewhere where you could have a variance that wouldn't affect people as much. So that wouldn't bother me. And so just kind of doing the math when I did that, if you have a 4-foot rear in the back, now you've got a 36 by 102 foot, buildable pad. And now your FAR is like 0.82. So now you're kind of like in the ball game. So that's a way of kind of giving a little bit if that is what one is inclined to do, and still maintaining the heliotrope setback. So that's kind of, I mean, I'm sure the architects kind of did a million different schematics and a million different ways to do it, but that's kind of what I would have done. I mean, if you're trying to get it done. I think I'd maybe touch again on what Commissioner Celine suggested, and that I think there's probably an argument for some variances on this lot because it is a little weird. I think the front setback, or at least the 20-foot setback, maybe if we want to step away from kind of the orientation questions, I think it's to me, I have a hard time getting my head around that one. But as far as if this were not if it were not to go forward in its current form, I think I'd give the feedback, at least from my perspective, that a 10-foot back setback doesn't seem necessary, and some of the setbacks associated with the front and rear on the third floor, I think, is probably also ripe for variances, personally. But that's kind of where my head's at right now.
So I think what we should also recognize here is that the proposed variances are along the property line between this home and the adjacent home, which was called the rear, but it's actually a side. And then the other is 5 feet, which actually is not, now that I'm thinking about it, that's not a variance at all. Along Bayview, they're asking for 20 feet, and there's a reason. You get a driveway, which is, nearly unheard of, and you get the opportunity to go subterranean off of that side, which is helpful by utilizing the topography. I think that the problem, the one that I'm having the biggest issue with, is just that 10 feet on heliotrope. Just doesn't seem appropriate. And maybe it's not 20, but I think that my personal opinion is that the architect needs to come back with another alternative, whether it's stepping back more and being more in line with, to try to give the vision of a 20-foot setback by stepping the house back. And that's that wedding cake effect of how you could build a home. That's what I think you could get by with. And I don't know, we can go round and round on this for a while. So, I don't know that we can give direction for the future, but I am not supporting this variance.
Chair Rosine, if it's the will of the body, one option would be to keep the public hearing open and perhaps continue it to provide the architect and the property owners additional time to meet with staff and see some adjustments if the commission does not want to or move forward with a decision today.
So we have two options. We could, if the applicant requested a continuance, or we could
approve or deny.
Approve or deny.
I think it would be challenging to approve with modifications, just
Correct.
Based on how complex the adjustments would be. So those would be really your three options.
Okay, commissioners, I'm prepared to make a motion to deny the application and deny the variance. So I'll make a motion to deny.
I guess, can we ask the applicant if they'd rather continue?
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Is that an option?
You may.
Okay,
Yes.
then I'll remove that motion and would like to ask the applicant if they would like to request a continuance to work with staff and the neighborhood on this. And I guess that means reopening, thank you. We're opening the hearing.
Brandon Lindsay from Brandon Architects again. We are happy to request a continuance. With that being said, some guidance that you guys can talk amongst yourselves or however that happens with what you see as a good direction to take.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you. Then I guess we're going to close the public hearing again.
Actually, if we could keep it open, and then we would just continue it to.
Okay, we'll
a
keep
date
it open and we'll continue to future time.
But do we want to offer some suggestions or recommendations so that they know what they're going back and talking about?
Staff, how do you feel about that?
So I think we would like to hear from the commission if there's any first guidance for the architects so they can work on the project. Clearly work with the residents, but from a scheduling standpoint, probably won't come back till January. We'll just renotice the item.
Okay. Why don't we want to go from left to right and just make some comments? Try to be.
I think I just repeat what I said, which is that my real concern on this project is the setback from heliotrope, and that I think that's probably ripe for some reasonable variances beyond that, from my perspective.
Similarly, that the heliotrope setback should be at least on the first floor. There could be some opportunity for variance, which that first floor not being livable, but that garage subterranean space, and that the livable space step back in some sort of wedding cake fashion, enough to give that feeling for a larger setback along heliotrope.
I would agree that heliotrope is the issue. I don't know that a full 20 feet is necessary from my perspective, but certainly 10. I don't know that 10 is enough. So.
I didn't say much because I was actually trying to think back and forth, and Jerry did a great job doing the report there, and so I'm in the same position. I mean, I'm a good staff did a good job in writing it up. I always sympathetic to the property owner, but my one issue is really that setback on heliotrope. If we can fix that, kind of modify that in some way, the other ask I'm much more sympathetic to.
Yeah, and I'll say the same thing. I think that the rear setback, the 10-foot, isn't as important to me because it's practically a side setback, the way I look at it, but it's heliotrope that really matters, so I think that's what we need to protect. And same thing with the third level. If there's something we can do there, that's fine.
Excuse me, is that sufficient guidance for staff?
Thank you.
All right, so we can close the public hearing?
You know, I think since,
Keep it open.
I
We'll keep it
apologize.
open.
I did hear from the director that we'll have it renoticed so that the members of the public have full information, so I don't think it requires any further action from you at this point.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next item. Item number 4, motions for reconsideration. Are there any motions for reconsideration? Hearing none. Item 5 is a report from the Community Development Director.
Yes, Chair Rosine, just Jaime Murillo, Deputy Director. Just want to mention that the city is underway with our general plan update efforts, and we're starting to have community meetings. We had our first community meeting last week. Our second meeting is actually going on right now in the community room. That topic is on coastal resilience and safety. But we have 2 upcoming community meetings as well on December 4th, which will be arts and cultural and Historical Resources, and on December 5th, which is also a Planning Commission date, and that topic will be on land use, harbor
Everyone,
bay,
could we,
beaches.
I'm sorry, Jaime. Could we just go ahead and exit and have your conversations outside, please? Thank you. Sorry about that, Jaime.
No problem. But we do understand that these community meetings are the same time as Planning Commission, and so there's opportunities for members of the public to participate online. So all the activities that are going on at the community meeting, they can participate online, and so there's a more interactive way to participate. We're really looking for comments from community members and residents to really share their thoughts and ideas about how they envision Newport Beach to be in 2050. So that's kind of the target for our general plan update. But that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jaime. Does anyone from the audience wish to comment?
Sorry, and just to mention, we also have a Planning Commission meeting on December 5th.
Okay. All right, so item number 6, requests for excused absences. Are there any requests for excused absences this evening? All right, seeing none, then we are adjourned.